and welcome to all of you and those who are watching this wonderful discussion by our esteemed panel of guests. Thank you, and we hope you get valuable insights in terms of through their life journeys in terms of how to go about the inside-out approach towards self-growth. It's about doing the inner work and being able to grow from within, just like a tree is given water so that it's from within the roots become healthy, so that the outside fruits become healthy, and not the other way around, that you try to push the growth without making the roots strong. And all our cultures, whether it is the Western culture, Eastern cultures, they all talk about growth from within. And so that's something that is a very long-term perspective instead of a short-term benefit. A growth from within can be sometimes takes a lot of patience and effort and courage and will, which we'll talk about the journeys that the four panel members have had. But it gives you lifelong growth, and you can always leverage that knowledge in future as well. So that is what we're going to talk about, and that is what the book that I'm going to be publishing later, the gifts of the secret gifts of the perfect storm, also talks about. So we'll talk about the panel, what kind of storms and challenges they have come across, and whether it's personal or professional, and how they have worked through themselves to be a more sorted version of themselves, and what made them, what enabled them to do that. And let's learn from them. We learn from the best. So thank you, all of you. I would like to welcome Junko Nagao. Hello, Junko. She is a catalyst, multi-systems convener, and leadership advisor from Santa Fe and New Mexico. Junko founded New Siphagon to bridge spiritual and business sectors. Welcome, Junko. Thank you for coming for this discussion. We have Shamla Krishnan, senior partner at Search Value, which is a global executive search. Thanks, Shamla, for being here.
Thanks for having me, Amrita, today. Pleasure meeting all of you.
Dr. Samir Gupta, he has a varied experience in tech as well as financial markets. Samir lives in San Francisco Bay with his wife, 3 kids, and a dog. And he loves hiking, reading poetry, photography, and he occasionally writes poetry, including limericks on demand. Welcome, and thank you for being here, Samir.
Thank you, Amrita, for having me. Very excited to be here and talk to this panel.
And last but not the least, we have Dilip Rajput. He's director consulting with Larsen & Toubro Infotech, and known Dilip also for a long time, very energetic, passionate. He also does poetry, by the way, with Samir, and I think you guys can connect later. And yeah, thank you so much, Dilip. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Amrita. I have a lot to learn in this discussion, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yes. I think for people who do inside-out approach, we learn from every moment, including me. For me, it's a great privilege and learning experience as well. Thank you so much. So without much ado, let's start. So the way I will go about this, I will check with you in terms of your understanding and how you have approached life. So my first question, or rather I would say the first thing I would like to share would be, what are some of the big moments that you crossed successfully? Challenges, it could be storms, through your inner efforts. And the bridges and the practices that you built to be able to work this out. What are these that contributed to the outcome? I think the audience would love to listen to you. And Shamla, would you like to say something about this?
Sure. Thanks, Amrita, for really having this session, because every discussion helps us in getting clarity for ourselves. So, I really appreciate being invited. So, I'd like to tell a small story. I'll not take too long a time. This is essentially, I think this was around 22 years back when I was coasting along in my life, if you will. And I got married, and it was an arranged marriage, and with rosy things that are there in our mind when you get into a marriage and a relationship. Unfortunately, I realized that the person I was married to is not mentally accepting me as a wife, as a life partner. mentally, nor physically. By God's grace, I sort of, sort of cut it short. It was only a 5 month long marriage, and I had the family support to sort of take the decision to step out of it. But of course, when I did that, uh, I was totally shattered because I thought I was not okay. There is something wrong with me, and I was sort of blaming myself for what had happened, and my self-esteem was at the lowest, really. And I think somewhere down the line, I was wondering, should I live my life? Uh, but I must say that the storms that we face, what helps us to really face the storms are first and foremost the people around us. I had great parents and who sort of supported me very much. Uh, there were certain things that I did myself to sort of help me, and it was not an immediate thing. This is a 1 year journey of post sort of coming back to my parents' house. Thankfully, my organization I was working in welcomed me back to the city that I was in. I got my job back. So from that aspect, things were not much different. My parents were there, my office was there, my colleagues were there, but somewhere, my mind was not really there, trying to figure out what has happened. So certain things that I did with my parents' help was that, I sort of one day, my mother is a Bhagavad Gita teacher. So I sort of stumbled into, she told me, hey, what are you doing at home? Come on, let's go. Because they knew that they needed to bring me out of the shell I was in. Okay, thinking, the mind is a devil. So she told me, okay, why don't you come and join me for my class? And it was providence that the day she called me was the chapter 6 in Bhagavad Gita, where there's a sloka. I will just like to read it quickly for you all because it sort of touched me a lot. It reads like this: Uddared Atmanatmanam Atmanam Avasadayet Atmeva he Atmano Bandur Atmeva Ripur Atmanam. It's in Sanskrit. So Atma is the mind. A couple of words from here. Bandur means friend, and Ripur means enemy. So I heard my mother explaining in the class, and how your mind is your friend and your mind is also your enemy. So this is a part of Shankya Yoga, is what I understood. I'm still learning Bhagavad Gita. I'm getting different interpretations over the last 22 years. So I realized that it is all me. So I need to figure out the grief, the trauma, the sadness, or whatever I was feeling. I needed to figure it out myself, and I was responsible for myself. I cannot escape from it because what had happened was that it was affecting my job. It was affecting my professional life. I was not playing in the front foot. Otherwise, I had a very, active professional life. My professional life was where I used to talk to customers, talk to professionals whom I represent, lot of conversations and a lot of discussions. But I was not doing all of that. I was in my own little shell. So I think, luckily, the support system I had, plus over the first year after sort of coming back home, I started figuring out my mind. I started realizing that I need to accept what has happened to me and sort of go forward and sort of look at how I can forget what has happened and look at how I can better myself. So spirituality, so though I was born and brought up in a house which is spiritual, Bhagavad Gita, all of that, honestly, I hadn't read Bhagavad Gita till that time. Okay, so a couple of things happened, Amrita. One was I was introduced to Bhagavad Gita. I was sort of willing to be open to looking at things to understand myself, if you put it very simply. So I got into Reiki. Reiki essentially is harnessing the energy that all of us have. According to Reiki, there are a whole lot of chakras in our body, very simply put, and because of mental, physical trauma, the chakras get all uh, disturbed and fogged, and they collect dust. To put it very simple way, and the Reiki healing practice essentially means cleansing these chakras. It's a I still practice Reiki, and I will say I was just tip of the iceberg really. I can be more disciplined in it. So Reiki helped me at that time. I was also introduced to transaction analysis, and certain concepts within transaction analysis, which is life strokes, uh, you know, uh, 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 I'm okay, you're okay, life position. Because I was at a place where I was telling myself, I'm not okay, but he or they are okay. When you're in that position, you're actually, you don't have a strong self-esteem, you're not confident about yourself. So I started confronting all these feelings that I had. So I think some of these practices sort of helped me accept what had happened to me, and sort of look at it, and realizing that okay, it has happened, but I need to move on with my life. And how am I going? What are the tools that are going to help me? It was essentially controlling my mind, making my mind my friend, and really becoming aware of what I was thinking. So yeah, that's a small story that I wanted to share. And
Thank you so
and
much, Shamla.
I think after that, I there was a pivot in my life after this. I became stronger in everything, in my relationships. um, I became a better friend to my friends. I became a better professional at work. So I think it was just not blaming others for what I went through, but figuring out my mind, and figuring out how I can come out of it and strengthen myself. It's not easy. It was not easy at all, doing that. But I think I just had to look at it and accept it and move on with it.
So thank you so much, Shamla. I mean, one, thank you for sharing something which is very personal to you. So, it takes courage to do that sharing itself here. So I applaud that. And also the fact that that's exactly what the whole book is about. Shamla talked about transaction analysis. So though your parents were very supportive of you, that does not make your agony lesser than what it would be otherwise to other people. And what very important when you bring up transaction analysis is it's also the thoughts and beliefs that have been put into us that also defeats or enables us in the future. So being able to distinguish what's a defeating thought and what's the empowering thought, and working with that to be able to get through that is something that is beautiful. And chakra work, by the way, is also something that as tool I've mentioned how to work on that on the book as well, because aligning our chakra from the root survival to the creative part to the energy part to the genuine authentic expression vision, all of these parts are so important to be able to align. And thank you for bringing all this up. And of course, I'm sure, at least I am very interested to understand how you have, maybe an example instance of how you have used this, and related to the concept of I O me, the concept of the book, and to really understand and learn from you. But just before that, would like to go to the other panel members and hear from them about their journey as well, the way Shamla shared. So, Samir, would you like to make a very brief 3 minutes sharing on this?
Sure. Thanks, Amita. And thank you, Shamla, for sharing a deeply personal story. My own story also goes back quite a bit. It's about 18 years ago. And just to set the context, this was 2004. I was about a year in to having started my own hedge fund with a partner. We were in slightly rocky business times. My mathematical models weren't working as well as they should have. We were also expecting our second child. My wife was 6 months pregnant at this point. And there was a fair amount of day-to-day stress in life. So we decided to take a vacation and fly from the Bay Area to Vancouver. On the flight, unfortunately, I had a retina detachment. So I, as was my norm, had gone up to sleep on the flight. woke up and realized I could not see out of one eye. It was a deeply stressful thing, but I did realize instantly what was happening because I had known about this. Anyway, so we stayed in Vancouver for a few days, had surgery, flew back to the Bay Area, and then I had a second attachment. Over the next 2.5 years, I regained and lost sight in that eye about 13 times. I had a total of 13 surgeries. And each surgery meant that I had to, after surgery, rest in a particular position. Often it meant lying face down for 18 hours a day, alone with my thoughts, right? So I have estimated that over those 2.5 years, I spent about 6 months lying face down, thinking about things. And as you can imagine,
the universe
this
compels
was
you in situations where you're forced to think.
exactly. And you know, there's a lot of negative thoughts that enter your mind at times like these, right? There is self-pity, there is anger, there is somebody, you're looking for somebody to blame for what has happened, right? You are also unsure about what will happen in the future. What I call the sort of the hope and then the clashing of the hope every time I could see and then not see was really interesting to deal with, right? I would wake up in the morning and we have the ceiling with lines on it, and I would look and see if I could see the lines. And I still do that, by the way, with my other eye, because I know that what happened in one eye could happen to the other at some point. But it really forced me to think about where I was, where I had to get to. You know, when our son was born, when he would cry, I could not pick him up because I was not allowed to pick up anything heavier than a Coke can. So it was a very, very interesting, you know, and very self-reflective time, because it forced me to really come to grips with who I was as a person. You know, I had this identity. I was a mathematician. I was, you know, an intellectual. And I had read and thought deeply about many things, but I had sort of never spent time thinking about myself, right? In some sense, I was an autopilot till that moment when I got interrupted. And what I realized was that it's okay to feel negative feelings.
Yeah.
It's important to then express them in some way which is not destructive to yourself and the people around you. It's, you know, and then that gives you the sense of detachment, not to sort of pun on the word, of being able to analyze your own feelings without getting involved in them.
Just if I may just add something beautiful you said. That's the crux of the whole thing that I love. The point is, when we accept something, we become less attached to it. Oh, it's beautiful.
Absolutely.
It's the deepest that you can say. And thank you for bringing that up. The more I reject something, the more I end up getting attached to it because it doesn't go. You know, for children, when you say no, they will do it.
Yeah, absolutely, Amita. And that's a very good point. And I'll just add that attachment is not absolute or perfect. It's a process, right? I mean, just even acceptance takes time, and it's never 100%, right? I mean, even today, 18 years later, I wake up and say, oh, you know, I wish that hadn't happened, right? But for the most part, I would say the things that helped me was, of course, friends and family. It was my wife bore the brunt of this and was a very strong partner. Our friends rallied around us, family did as well. And I think that really helped build the support structure on which then I was able to sort of move forward, right? I think meditation was a huge part of what allowed me to develop the calm, because I was working in finance at that time, and you know, it's very, very by the minute. The markets move up and the markets move down, and then, you know, I had to constantly sort of strive for this balance between my short-term, day-to-day actions and this longer term. And so I found that if I woke up in the morning and meditated before I actually started work, I could actually both navigate the shorter term day-to-day decisions, but also not let them get into my bigger life picture, right? Because, you know, there was a day when the market went down, we lost a lot of money, and then you would think, oh my God, I'm going to go blind, I'm going to have this baby, and the markets are down, and my fund is going to fail. And there's a lot of negativity, and you need to make sure that you don't build a flywheel of the negativity, but it feeds into itself.
So
and amplifies.
just to bring this awareness is the so whatever happens, we, like you said, people just term it negative, and they say, oh, let me think of the opposite, of the rainbows, of the sunshine. But this thing is coming. It's probably a signal for you to do something about it. So
Yes,
it's like fear, the basic fear that we had as hunters at one point of time was to save ourselves and not freeze, kind of. So what is that I need to do is something you need to sit with it, and people don't.
absolutely.
It's very uncomfortable to sit with that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll just end with one final thing, like Shamla from the Gita, Ma Phaleshu Kadachana, which is, do your duty,
Yeah.
don't worry about the results. And I interpret that in a slightly different way, which is, um, it's not that you don't care about the results. You care to succeed. You work hard to succeed. But the work that you do is in itself what you did. You cannot control the result, and beyond that,
Yeah.
you can. So even today, I will tell my teams, do what's in your power and do it to the best of your ability. And then beyond that, we will see what happens, right? And I believe that that's not worrying about things we have no control over really allows us to then focus on what's important to us and what we can control and do better.
Yeah, and once that is over, once you've delivered, and if something was, didn't meet to where you ended up, you can do the whole process again. Stay with it, understand,
Exactly.
sense it, be mindful, look at the eye of the storm, get the aspect that could have gone well, apply it elsewhere. So that's the process is lifelong. And after 3 such attempts, the 4th time you'll be brilliant. You might even end up with a
Absolutely.
product that nobody expected. So yeah, that's the process. So thank you so much, Samir. Thank you for your valuable insight.
Absolutely.
Anyone, Dilip or Junko, would like to go next?
Sure. Thank you so much for those stories. I'm still kind of like wrapping them around my head. So one of the biggest challenges, I think, when it comes to alignment of inner and outer, came to me in 2018 when I all of a sudden came into light language. And light language, a lot of people may not know in the spiritual world, but more and more is coming out. There are a lot of people who are doing code. Amrita, you and I met through that as well, where they're beautiful imagery or drawings that convey the energy of movement or movement within the body and the etheric bodies. When you come into this spontaneously, it's such a shocker. And so, and it's so out of the realm of, politics or business or anything that I've been experiencing in the past.
Can you tell our guests here and maybe the audience what in a 2-3 lines, what do you mean by a light worker?
So light worker, light worker, I define as anybody who's working with energy. Like when you're talking about Reiki, you're channeling energy through your physical body. Light language is when you're actually channeling verbally a different language that is kind of like what a lot of people are saying, the original language of the human race, or like all these different races.
Yeah, it's also a soul's language.
Right. It bypasses the brain. Very few people are doing research in this space, but when you look at nanoscience and space science and technologies, we're slowly actually getting into this area. And this is where I'd love to see intersectionality of fields, from neuroscience all the way to physics and things like that. And I could totally geek out. But trying to fold that into your reality is a bit of a challenge. It was a bit of a challenge for me because I worked around, people who are in politics, who are in business leaders, like I have an Ivy League, stacked education, and no one around me was doing this. And everybody kind of thinks you're crazy because you're speaking a completely different language. You're making some noises that sound like language, but nobody understands what you're saying.
And when I was reading your profile, the first thing that came to my mind is taking that concept to the leadership, to the top levels, to
Right.
the rational world, and then that itself is a bridge and a catalyst and a storm coming up. So yeah.
Right. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Talk about storming, right? Because it's an internal storm that you have to then work within the 3D physical context that you came into this world as, and really trying to not lose my mind and feel like I'm going crazy was one of the biggest challenges. And in 2011 and 12, I was introduced to Zazen meditation through a network of monks who were doing suicide prevention for a lot of male family members, like so the head of households in Japan who were committing suicide right after the earthquake. And we already, in Japan, we already have a high suicide rate anyway. So they had coalesced in the 80s to provide these suicide prevention programming. And so I was introduced to a monk who then taught me how to do Zazen in our secondary post PTSD sort of work, internal work as a first responder. And that really helped me sort of ground myself, but also start looking within for answers. So I don't have any teacher or guru or somebody who I've been learning from, and finding little bits and pieces of information through movies, through stories that have been coming out, whatever story or book or magazine that I look at, and some words just start popping out, being more emphatic and stick to my mind. And then that connects with a question that I've been asking myself in the spiritual space. And so trying to integrate this into 3D, like in more real material world of business has been a journey for me since 2018 particularly, but it's a non-linear process. Sometimes, I feel like I'm accelerating, and other times I'm like, okay, I'm going back
I love the word non-linear, Jimko. The whole process that Sameer, Shamla, and I'm sure Dilip also going to talk about how we evolve and stay with that inner self and work on. It's a non-linear, it's a parallel.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff like Sameer said when he was lying in 2 months in the bed, and there are other aspects to take care, and how he evolves himself at the same time parallelly works that out. So that's a beautiful word you said, Jimko. Yeah.
But it is a practice, it's a muscle that just like any other training, it's a muscle. And so, some people, they accelerate really quickly just because they've exercised that muscle in other areas of their lives. Like, an athlete might be able to make the connection really quickly. Or, if you're an engineer and you're trying to learn a software language, like you kind of know the process. Everyone has some kind of skill that they can translate into learning it really quickly within, but again, being really kind to yourself. I think that's something that we've lost in business, in the real, like what we call the real world. And so I try to bring the kindness back into the everyday like conversations that we have, speaking authentically, sharing, emotional hits that I get. When you're speaking from this place of absolute authenticity, then the other person, like that energy then reflects right back at you from that other person, and that other person then becomes also authentic with you, and this is your book talks about the inner and outer and embodying the being. It's like really when you start, so your vocabulary of embodying the being, I call lived experience. If you have lived this experience and you viscerally feel something, then you're able to bring that into your conversations. So even if you don't energetically have, like for light language, you're speaking a different language and you're channeling a frequency, when you're speaking from this authentic place, then your soul is open. You're very heart-centered.
So the inner experience, if it's authentic, the outer experience that you will get from people is also authenticity. So
absolutely.
Pure space that you get, yeah.
And sometimes that could come out in a really interesting way of like, the other person actually telling you the truth that they didn't mean to tell you, and they reveal their side of the story that I don't think they actually realize that they're saying to you something that they don't want to share with you. And so it becomes like a really tricky thing where you have to really sit in integrity and honor that person's truth. no matter how you might interpret it through your ego. So,
Yeah.
so those are things that I've been, like integrating, but also learning how to teach other folks so that we don't really lose sight of the fact that we're here in this physical body with a very active mind.
So, Junko,
that's
you're a classic
extremely
example
creative.
of having to live the storm to be able to drive home the point about their own challenges. So, to be able to bridge that gap of, being able to look beyond what's there in front of us, and not from the old beliefs or something. We work from authentic soul self, and the current understanding to the level that the corporate world also has gone is about servant leadership, of kindness in leadership, and that brings out the best in people. That's not everybody's cup of tea, and I'm sure a lot of leaders are like, no, this doesn't work. But like you said, practice and habit, nothing like it. We have Dilip, who's been patiently waiting, and thank you for your patience. And what do you have to say about your journey, and how have you approached it?
Patience is my second name, but we'll jump to the story. Uh, so I'll take you almost 25 years back when I was in school. I cleared my 8th standard exam with 26th rank in my division. It was 1997, and it was mid-semester, 9th standard. The subject was geometry. I was not able to answer any question in that paper. I was blankly staring at the paper and was so upset with myself for not studying. Tears were rolling out, sheet was soaking. Somehow I managed to complete the paper. Uh, when results came, I failed in geometry. I just scored 13 marks out of 75. Still, I had my hopes high that somehow I will be able to clear maths exam, because maths was a combination of algebra plus geometry. Both were 75, 75, 150 mark paper. If you gain 52, you are still pass. Uh, Luckily, unluckily, I got 37 in algebra, and when you add up that, it comes to exact 50, 2 marks short. Uh, my professor, Brahmbhatt sir, I went to him. I told him, "Sir, can you give me 2 marks and I'll be passed? I'll go happy back to my home." Uh, I don't know what happened to him that day, but he was not even a mood to listen. Even after so many requests, his answer was simple: no. This no was a life-changing no. More than parents being upset about my failure, I was upset with myself. The whole circle of life really hinges on the two things. One, hope for something better, and second, fear of something worse. While hope may be good, fear certainly leads to worry, which isn't good for life. In Bharat, we say, Chita Chinta Samaprokta Bindu Matram Visheshta Sajivam Dahate Chitta Nirjive Dahate Chitta, which means fire and worry. They are same. There is only a difference of dot, but the fire burns you when you are dead, but worry burns you throughout the life when you're alive. With this big no from my professor, my hopes were gone for a toss. I had a choice to worry about the complexities of geometry or explore the possibilities of solving them with a great. I took this very personally. I studied for geometry persistently and solved every possible problem in the textbook multiple number of times. Um, as a result, I scored decent mark in geometry in my quarter semester. I turned out to be a rank 4 when I completed my ninth class. When I completed my SSC or 10th grade, I was first in my class, second in school. And truly, this event made me what I am today. And till date, I'm practicing what I learned out of that instance. And that was aware about the world, compete with the self, but explore possibilities beyond the no.
And from all the others who have said, this looks to be a very simple example, to be able to get that insight from the eye of the storm, from the quote that you gave, and insight that this is how I am to go proceed. To be able to come till there took a lot of pain. And you could have said, forget it, I'll do it again later, or whatever it is. Or you could have drowned yourself in pain, pity, or whatever. You would have said, gone to your mom and cried, I can't do it, and whatever. But being accepting that this is what happened and this is what I want, and being able to stay with that discomfort, is where you move into the storm and the eye of the storm. And that's where people move out of that. They would like to be in the comfort zone and move out of the storm, and then you can't come to the eye. And it's only through that eye that you were able to work hard, right?
Actually, that reminded me of I was also failed in 2000, a year before, just for 1 mark, and that point in time I brought my friend to give an excuse to my family that why did I fail, and the excuse was that there is a professor who took tuition and he passes only who really goes to that his tuitions.
You could have taken
So
up that.
maybe
You could have taken up. That's what I'm saying. People who want to be out of the storm will take up anything that they can get a hand on. And it's called payoff in psychology, where we say it's a short-term gain but a long-term loss. And today, Dilip, like you said, it's a long-term gain because what you learned there, you're still using in your job. And I could see a couple of corporate terminologies, which is actually what the storm is all about, is solution focused in place of problem focused. Is typically what you mentioned just now. And also,
right.
The combination of having a vision, having the courage, having an openness to experiment because I am courageous, and through that you're getting an insight, um, getting inspired because of the insights, trusting those insights and taking it forward, and then the growth. This is not a one-day thing or even a 1 month thing, right? And like all of you pointed out, patience, perseverance, practice. And I'm so happy you've brought, all four of you have brought such beautiful aspects. Shamla, you covered the learning through transaction analysis, learning through Reiki, learning through your own inner work, patterns, breaking the patterns. Even Junko, you brought in the light work and aspects of, staying with our own energies rather than, here and now, and not, working on that. And Samir, you also worked on meditation and Reiki, and you also spoke about meditation, right? So all of these aspects is I've mentioned in the book in terms of tools and how do you use it. Other question that I would like to ask, and Shamla, if you can answer this question, is in your opinion, what do you understand about the ways of dealing with the professional and personal conflicts? I'm sure there was a lot of intra-conflict, inter-conflict, whether it's personal, professional, anything that comes up, and maybe from the perspective of this I owe me concept, I owe it to me. The inner experience, what you have, is what you get outside. So how do you channelize the inner experience so that you get that same in outside? So anything that comes up to you.
Sure. So, I've been told I'm a good storyteller. So I will just quickly tell another story also in my life. So the first story was 22 years back. So, I thankfully, by God's grace, I sort of remarried again in 2003. We were blessed with a boy. And, I had a difficult pregnancy, and I was actively working, and I took a break, from my professional life to sort of take care of my son. I had by then become an entrepreneur, and I had started my own organization, a small boutique firm. But somewhere down the line, around 2010, my son was 5 years old, and he was diagnosed with being on the autism spectrum and ADHD. I sort of had to take a hard decision of closing down my business and sort of focusing all my energy towards figuring out and helping my son, and the therapies and the different support that my son kind of needs. So that was where I had to sort of sacrifice. I will call it sacrifice at this point in time. At that point in time, it was more like a sacrifice because to me, because I had to put a stop to my professional life and figure out to support my son. Somewhere down the line, after a couple of years of uh, helping him, we both had to face a lot of social pushbacks, school pushbacks, etc. I realized that I owed it to myself to take care of myself, because I needed to nourish myself to nourish my son.
Yeah.
Uh, and what my nourishment till then has been my professional success. And I was not nourishing myself, in the hope that I'm going to give my all to my son. I sort of did not realize that it's a long race and I need to pace myself. Right. So that was a conflict that happened multiple number of times as to the professional and personal conflict as to, what should I give away and what should I hold on to. Somewhere down the line, I felt that, I needed to balance both. Life has to go on. All the balls need to be sort of in the air. And I don't need to be a great juggler, but I need to learn to handle the different facets of my life. So, essentially, I went part time, started working part time in a firm, dividing my attention professionally, nourishing myself, and hence my input to my son personally was much better. So this I of me is according to me is very important, because it sort of helps in linking the different parts of our life. All right, because the moment we sort of don't take care of ourselves, the input that we give our people who are sort of in our life, who depend on us, also is sort of is not, it's not a good input, right? So I owed it to myself to uh, get back into nourishing myself, whether it was body. I was 103 kgs at that time, because I was stressed out. I was sort of thinking that I'm fighting this autism, all right, which my son was facing. I took care of my body. I went back into being a gym freak, if you will, which I was, 22 years back. I regained myself. I ran races. I started pushing back the setbacks. I started becoming more resilient to pushbacks that I was getting. So I feel this whole I of me essentially is how you take care of your mind, body, and soul, so that you nourish yourself, so that you can nourish the others. So it's a vicious circle. It's only when you give yourself a good input that you can give input to others.
So just to add on, just so that we have a close on that, is when you say that our mind body connect, it's also about being aware of what are the areas where I tend to overdo things. Like, there are some beliefs that we have that I have to try hard. All of those sometimes are good, but sometimes they actually become into defeatism. So being aware of that and taking up only that much that is productive, it's a storm itself, right?
Yeah, and also you feel guilty. You feel guilty of owing yourself.
Yeah.
And that is a storm that you have to take care of, to sort of figure out that, it's okay to take care of yourself.
And
also.
okay to let go of certain things, all of those
Absolutely.
aspects. Thank you bringing in. Yes, Dilip, can I have you to share about your journey, how you connect to the inside out approach?
Yeah. So, in the example which I shared earlier, I can personally correlate with sensing and the explore to equip part. I sensed my discomfort with geometry was really in the perception of the complexities without even making an attempt to understand it. Hence, what I did was I equipped myself to look at the smaller increments than the bigger problem, building a base and then going to solve a complex problem. The moment I mechanized this whole process of problem solving into series of steps, the geometry became fun. Even today, when I hit a roadblock in conceptualization, uh, these geometric shapes opens the gate for me. It's a story of last week only. Uh, I devised a whole data-related consulting framework just by looking at the geometrical shape. That's how that impact that particular incident had on my life.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, which was once a discomfort for me, it really now inspires me to be a creative.
So something that's coming up beautiful, Dilip, from what you said is the fun part. As a coach, I also use parts work, shadow work, and also values. So all of us have the inner psyche, like Freud and Carl Jung say that we are made of hundreds of inner psyches, and each of them have their values. So values of adventure and fun. If I have and I don't utilize that, I'm not going to do a good job. But for you to be able to identify that in the troubling time, to say, this is what makes me productive and then work, is because you stayed in that storm and got the insight. Otherwise, we don't function from that. We function from whatever we can get hold of and we do that, right? So that's a classic example of you perseverance of staying in that space and hence getting an insight exactly what is the inner part of you want, not what the mathser wants. What is the inner you want? And that's a fabulous
Exactly.
example. Thank you, Dilip. Thank you so much.
Uh, it-
If I, in terms of interest of time, if I can jump to the next question, um, Samir, if you can, tell me in terms of any aspect from the book that you've gone through, that book of Secret Gift and the Perfect Storm, that connected to you most in terms of you being able to relate to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Amita. I think so one of my sort of philosophies for the last many years has been put on your oxygen mask before you help others. This is and really when I read the book, this was the one thing that came back to me is before we can give to others, we need to be able to take care of ourselves and be ready to give to others. And I think this is often the thing that we don't realize, especially in Indian culture, but in many other cultures, we're taught to give and not thinking of ourselves as selfish. And it takes a journey to learn this. And one of the most important part of this is two things. One is learning to say no, but also learning what to say no to. Right? In on a given day, you make 100 decisions. 95, maybe even 99 of these don't have a long-term consequence. Learning to identify which is that important one that you need to make a decision on the right way, giving your energies to that one, and learning to say no to some of the other things, which will not change between today and tomorrow, I think is key. And that's really what came to me as I was reading the book, Amita, is that idea again that, what do you think about and what do you not is very important to in taking care of yourself.
Thank you. So beautifully put, Samir. And though it may sound rational, but there's a lot of intuitive work, like whether it's light work, whether it is meditation, whether it's working through our own analysis, using the transaction or the coach. Sometimes we can coach ourselves, sometimes we need somebody to help us and counsel us. But understanding our own patterns that doesn't serve anymore, the belief that
Yes.
doesn't serve anymore. So, like you rightly pointed, Shamla also pointed out, the tendency to, give more to others and not to yourself, and those aspects. To be able to admit that, accept that is huge. A lot of people can't. And that's where the
Absolutely.
storm is all about, the whole book. And once you can cross that, trust me, it becomes addictive and you can always keep doing it. Yeah. Thank you, Sanjay.
Yeah,
Junko,
absolutely.
one last question. Any message that you want to give or leave to the audience from the context of inner work and inside out approach that you want to leave?
Sure. I think in the first chapter,
Yeah.
the first chapter, you actually speak about, having a ritual. And I find that is so key in not only giving yourself kindness, but what Samir was talking about, when you start practicing these things and you just have even a word, or like if you're a meditator, a breath, Like, what is the ritual that you use to come back to center so that you can actually do the reflection from an open space and not a judgmental space, not a critical space, and you're bringing in this love. And so I would say, when you read the book, the first chapter or so, like it gives you the kind of secret tools and step-by-step of being able to apply these next more integrated approaches to addressing, the inner and outer work. And I think it's beautifully written.
Thank you, Jinko. Thank you so much. Shamla, anything that you want to add in terms of?
So, yeah. So, it's not like that, I don't want to say that I've been in a lot of storms in my life, but yeah, slowly I'm sort of embracing the storms in my life, because I feel, there is certain framework that I have put in place to handle the storm. So I'm sort of becoming little better and better at handling it. So I feel that the last 10 years or so, I am sort of living my story. I'm inside my story, and not outside my story, trying to, figure and hustle for my worthiness. That's what there is a famous author who says that. You need to live in your story and face it, and instead of sort of just being out of your story. So
Simple. You need to live in the storm, is all he's saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, real pleasure. I'm sure the audience who are going to listen to you guys are going to enjoy this. I enjoyed it. I was wondering how the 45 minutes will pass. Didn't know how it passed. Thank you so much. Thank you, Junko. I'll call you up, each of you, again later, personally, and we'll talk. As of now, I'll leave with the message to the audience that the book is going to be released somewhere around end of May this year, or maybe the first week of June, or 10th of June max. So yeah, I'm eagerly waiting. Thank
We're
you.
also eagerly waiting,
Yes.
Amrita.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks,
you, everyone.
everybody.
Thank
It was
Pleasure
pleasure
being here.
meeting you all.
Same here. Bye.
Likewise.
Well.
Bye.